Hey my good friends, we are back in the kitchen today and we're going to deal with a mountain of kale that we've got out of the garden. This is what we've got. We've already put away all of our lettuce and stuff. We're going to give some of this away. The chickens have already got some of theirs. But come along for the ride and we'll show you what we're going to do. My little helper Ramona is back home today. I dropped her off at the airport this morning. She was back in California by lunchtime. We're going to miss her. We really enjoyed her visit here to the homestead. She was a big helper. Now what I'm going to do with some of this kale is we're going to make a kale soup today for dinner. And it's not going to be the soup that we made previously on the channel. It was a Portuguese recipe, sopa de coelho. We're just going to make a standard run-of-the-mill kale soup. We're starting out with 1 small onion chopped, and we've got about 2 tablespoons of butter in there, and we're going to soften these onions up, and then we'll start adding some of our other ingredients. Alright, we've got our onions almost soft, and they're starting to brown a little bit. So to that, I'm going to add some sliced Polish sausage. And this is what we're using here. You could use smoked sausage. You could use any meat, really. You could use bacon. You could use pork chops. Really, whatever you got. You don't have to stick to this recipe at all. Just like normal. You can change it and make it your own. So we're going to cook this sausage a little bit in the onions. And I'm going to get some garlic out of the fridge. And we're going to throw some garlic in here a little bit. Alright, everything's looking nice in there. We're starting to get some little brown bits, which is good. Remember, brown is flavor. So we're going to add into the pot about 2 cloves worth of garlic. And we're not going to cook that very long. We don't want it to burn. And then we're also going to add a teaspoon of our thyme, dry thyme that we dried in the garden. Start getting some flavor out of that. We'll get this stirred up, and then we're going to add some chicken stock over here. And I have about 1/4 of a carton of beef broth that I'm just going to throw in to get rid of. But you can just use one of these. Okay, time to add our stock. And if you remember, when you have stuff stuck to the bottom of the pot, those little brown goodies right there, when you add this cold stock, that will all come up. You're kind of deglazing the pan. And I'll show you. Once you add this cold liquid, all that stuff comes up. We'll tilt this a little bit so you can see that. It's all coming up. So I'm going to add our chicken stock. Again, which I would normally just do chicken stock. And this is 1/4 of chicken stock. Already smells amazing in the kitchen. And we're going to bring this to a simmer. Now, as we wait for this to come up to a simmer, we're going to add about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And because we're using the pre-made stock, it's got some sodium in it already, so we're not going to add salt right now, but we will check it for salt content later, right before we serve it. Now you noticed I only added onions to this soup. You can add carrots, celery, the whole trinity if you'd like. I've used fennel bulb before. Just about any vegetable you'd like to put in there would be just fine. Our soup has come to a simmer. And while we were waiting for that, we have stripped our kale. If you've never done that before, you just hold it by the stem, use your other hand, just strip the leaves off. And then any real big portions of leaves, I just tear them up with my hand. Probably got a couple good handfuls of kale there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a can of our cannellini beans, or cannellini, whatever they call them. We're going to dump that whole can in there. We did not drain it either. And then did pretty good. We're going to let that come back to a simmer again. And once it's back to a simmer, we're going to put in our kale. And that seems like a lot of kale there on the counter, but that's going to cook way down. Anytime if you've ever cooked cabbage or any type of greens, they almost disappear when you cook them. So let's bring that back up to a simmer. Now, if you'd rather not have the beans, which would be a good source of protein if you left the meat out, say if you were vegan or something like that, you can also do potatoes. Cube up some potatoes like we do in our Portuguese kale soup, and put those in the pot at this point where you would normally put the beans, and you would simmer those till the potatoes were soft, and then you would add in the kale then. Just be advised, if you're going to use potatoes, you're probably going to need a little more salt, because potatoes soak up a lot of sodium and need a lot of sodium to be flavorful. So probably going to add a little bit more. In fact, that's a good tip. If you ever get a dish too salty, if you add potatoes, it'll soak up some of that salt. All right, it's time to add our kale, and we're going to add it to where the pot's full, and then we'll stir it, and as it wilts, it'll wilt down into that pot. You can see it's already kind of sinking down into the pot as it cooks. But we'll put it all in there. We got room for it all. Just kind of fill the pot up. It'll be about the right amount of kale. So let's stir that in a little bit. Get it all down in that water, or the liquid. Now we're going to put the lid on this, let it simmer for a little bit, and all that's going to cook down into the soup. So Kelly's taking care of the rest of our kale. What are you going to do with it again, babe?
These I'll probably just add some olive oil, salt, and pepper. Maybe some garlic salt, and put them in the oven and make kale chips out of them.
Outstanding. That sounds yummy. Now, a lot of people are going to think that's going to wilt it down, but the texture is actually crunchy when it comes out. She's also going to give some of this to one of her co-workers, and then we're going to freeze some as well, which also probably sounds weird, but when you're making soups and stuff like that, you really don't worry about the texture because you're cooking it down anyway. But she's going to take care of this rest of this mountain of kale, so we have more to use in the future. But we still got more growing out in the garden, so we're going to have more later. All right, Kelly's making her kale chips. She just thrown some kale in our mixing bowl, mixed it with some of our garlic scape olive oil and some kosher salt, and then she puts those in the oven. What temperature, babe? 300 degrees. And then when they come out of the oven, she sprinkles a little bit of Parmesan cheese on them, and we'll show you what they look like when they come out. There's some of the kale chips out of the oven. You can see they retain their green color, and they're nice and crispy, crunchy, salty goodness. Tastes really good. Really good for snack. Kelly takes them in her lunch. We take them for road snacks sometimes too. And then she's also got the dehydrator out. She's going to dehydrate some kale, and she uses that in smoothies and other stuff where she needs the goodness of the greens, and just disappears into your smoothie. Kelly's also, besides all the kale, she's brought our herbs in to dry, some of them. We've got some of our chocolate mint up here. We've got some dill. We left some fresh dill in the garden. Rosemary, basil, and some oregano here on the bottom. We'll let all that dry real nicely, and then we'll put it in our containers in the cupboard. While I'm cooking, I've been enjoying some of Kelly's mint tea that she makes. We've got chocolate mint out in the garden, and she picks it and bruises it up, throws it in our Pampered Chef mixture pitcher, and it's really good. All right, the last ingredient in our soup was a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. That just gives the soup a little bit of brightness, brings out the flavor. You can't really taste the vinegar, it's just kind of a background thing. Now, you can also use different greens in this soup. You're not, exclusive to the kale that we put in here. You could use cabbage, you could use chard, you could use collards. just about any greens you would like. It'd be fine. I have tasted it for salt, and it is fine, but I'll let you be the judge of that. If you wanted to spice it up, you could put some crushed black pepper or crushed red pepper in there and give it a little kick, or just throw some hot sauce in it when you got it in your bowl. So we're going to have that soup for dinner, but take it from me, it's even better the next day. All those flavors come together. So if you're interested in our Portuguese version of the kale soup, look in our recipes playlist. I'll put a link to that here on this video. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Come back and see us on the farm.